The heat from the interstate asphalt that afternoon seemed to crawl inside, defying the car's air conditioning, which was working at full blast. Caroline gripped the steering wheel with both hands, her knuckles white. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been able to drive relaxed with Alex, her husband, and Rose, her mother-in-law, in the same vehicle. The car, which she had bought with her year-end bonus 2 years ago, seemed smaller than usual. It was suffocated by unspoken words and a tension that hung like a storm cloud. They were returning to New York from Philadelphia after attending the wedding of the daughter of one of Rose's distant cousins. 3 days that had felt like 3 years to Caroline. 3 days filled with fake smiles, answering trivial questions about her job and motherhood while waiting on her husband and mother-in-law as if she were a personal assistant instead of a family member. "It's so hot back here. Come on, turn the air up a little higher," Rose's voice broke the silence. Her tone was the same as always, not a request but a subtle command. Caroline didn't answer, just reached out and cranked the dial on the climate control. The blast of cold air instantly intensified. She glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her mother-in-law's reflection fanning her neck with a folded wedding program. Her face, as usual, showed dissatisfaction. "Honey, don't be so tense at the wheel. Relax. Or you're going to get us into an accident," Alex spoke this time from the passenger seat. He had just woken up from his nap, stretching lazily and yawning wide, completely unconcerned that his wife had been driving for nearly 3 hours without a break. Caroline took a deep breath, trying to find the last shred of patience she might have left in her heart. "I'm not tense, Alex. I'm focused." "Focused? Yeah, right, but don't make that bitter face. You look like someone who's drowning in debt," Alex replied lightly as he picked up his phone to play a game. The sounds of gunfire and explosions from his online shooter began to fill the cabin, competing with the hum of the tires on the asphalt. Caroline remained silent. It wasn't worth answering. Any response would be taken as a challenge, and every challenge would trigger an endless argument. She knew the script by heart. They would blame her for being a rebellious, bad wife and for not respecting her husband. An irony considering that her husband's entire current life was sustained by the fruits of her hard work. "Maria asked me today, Rose started up again. Caroline knew exactly where this conversation was headed. Maria was the cousin whose daughter had just gotten married. She asked when Caroline was going to give us a grandchild. I didn't even know what to tell her anymore." Caroline stayed silent. Her eyes were fixed on the seemingly endless highway. "What doctors have you been to? Maybe you're just too tired from working so much. That's why you're barren. A woman's place is at home, taking care of her husband, raising the children. Not out there working from morning till night," Rose continued, her tone growing sharper. "Yeah, you hear that. My mom's right. Maybe you should quit your job and let me bring home the bacon," Alex chimed in, his eyes still glued to his phone screen. Caroline almost laughed at that phrase. A bitter, painful laugh. Let me bring home the bacon. Her husband had been voluntarily long-term unemployed for nearly 5 years. After being laid off from his last job, he never took the job search seriously. There was always an excuse. The offer didn't fit his profile, the salary was too low, the boss seemed like a slave driver, the office was too far. Meanwhile, all the bills, the mortgage on the Scarsdale house, the groceries, even Alex's cigarettes and cell phone data plan came out of Caroline's bank account. "Life is expensive right now, Alex. If I quit my job, what are we going to eat?" Caroline responded, her voice low and controlled. "That's the husband's problem. Your duty as a wife is to support me and pray. Don't be so pessimistic. Money always shows up one way or another," he replied condescendingly, as if he were a great motivational speaker, and not a man who just that morning had asked his wife for money to buy a coffee at the rest stop. Exactly. Besides, what's the use of having so much money, a big house, and a nice car if your womb is barren? Rose's phrase hit Caroline's stomach like a punch, so sharp, so cruel that the pain spread through her entire body. She felt short of breath. For years, she had swallowed all these insults. She thought it was part of her duty, a test of patience in marriage. But today, at mile marker 82 on I-95, something inside her broke. Her glass of patience already cracked all over, shattered into 1,000 pieces. Alex, seeming to notice the change in atmosphere, finally put down his phone and looked at Caroline. "Why are you so quiet? My mom's right, isn't she? It's all for your own good. As your husband, I just want what's best for you. If the solution is for you to quit, then you quit. I don't want to have a barren wife who only cares about her career." Barren. The word echoed in Caroline's ears. The same word the doctor had dismissed 3 years ago. No, the doctor didn't say she was barren. He said she had a condition that made pregnancy difficult but not impossible. He suggested a series of therapies and a fertility treatment that required a large financial investment and commitment from both partners. Caroline was ready. She had saved up. But Alex always refused. His excuse was that it wasn't natural or they would do it when they had extra money. Curiously, he had just spent a fortune on the latest video game console. It all became clear to Caroline. It wasn't about a child, it wasn't about traditional roles, it was about power. They wanted her to stop working so she would lose financial control, so she would depend completely on Alex, so she would be weak, and they could trample on her as they pleased. "I'm the head of the family. You have to obey me," Alex continued, raising his voice. "If I say quit your job, you quit. Stop contradicting me all the time. I'm sick of your independent woman attitude." Rose intervened from the back. "My son is a saint for putting up with a woman like you. Another man would have divorced you a long time ago." And then came the final line, the trigger for the explosion. Alex looked at Caroline, his face red. "Or is it that you don't want to be with me anymore? Fine, if you can't stand it, ask for a divorce right now. I dare you. I'm sick of this." Silence. The sound of the game from Alex's phone, which he had left on the dashboard, became the only noise in the car. Caroline felt her blood stop for an instant before rushing through her body with overwhelming force. She felt a strange vibration, a new energy, cold and sharp. She turned her head toward Alex. For the first time in years, she looked her husband directly in the eyes, not with a pleading or submissive gaze, but with an empty, terrifying one. "Are you sure?" Caroline whispered, her voice hoarse. Alex, perhaps thinking his bluff had worked, smirked. "Of course I'm sure. What's the point of staying married if the wife is insubordinate?" Caroline nodded slowly. Very slowly. Then she looked forward again, focusing on the road. Without another word, her hand moved to turn on the right turn signal. The car slowed down and began to pull over onto the shoulder. "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you stopping here?" Alex asked, confused. "This is dangerous." "What are you thinking? Stopping in the middle of the highway," Rose exclaimed from the back. Caroline didn't respond. She pressed the brake until the car came to a complete stop on the lonely shoulder. In front of her, the vast dry landscape under an orange sky. Behind her, the roar of traffic. She turned off the engine. The sudden silence made the tension even more palpable. She looked at Alex again, then at Rose in the rearview mirror. Her gaze was glacial without a trace of emotion. "Get out," she said. "Just one word, just that." Alex and Rose looked at each other, confusion painted on their faces. "What do you mean, get out?" Alex asked, his voice losing its confidence. "I said get out," Caroline repeated, this time emphasizing each syllable. Her voice didn't tremble. It was firm. "You wanted a divorce. You dared me to ask for one. All right, let's start right now. Get out of my car." "Have you gone crazy?" Alex shouted. "Don't be shameless, Caroline." "I'm your mother-in-law," Rose shrieked. Caroline didn't flinch. She reached out and pressed the button to unlock the doors. The click of the locks echoed like a bell announcing her verdict. "I'm not going to repeat myself. Out." Alex looked at her, searching for any sign that this was a joke or a tantrum, but he found nothing. What he saw was the face of a stranger, a woman who had stopped feeling, who had reached her absolute limit. With hesitant movements, Alex opened the door. He thought Caroline would stop him, but she remained silent, staring ahead. Alex got out of the car, standing awkwardly on the gravel of the shoulder. "Rose, get out," Caroline said, with the same flat voice. "I will not. Are you going to leave me stranded in the middle of the road? You ungrateful brat." Finally, Caroline opened her own door, walked around the car to the rear door, and yanked it open. "Get out or I'll drag you out myself." That threat, combined with Caroline's terrifying glare, cowed Rose. Grumbling and cursing, she finally got out of the car. She stood next to Alex. They both looked small and disoriented in the vastness of the highway. They only had their small handbags. Their luggage, Alex's phone, his wallet, even the water bottles were still inside the car. Caroline returned to the driver's seat, closed the door, locked it again, and started the engine. She didn't look at them. She just looked ahead. Alex finally understood what was happening and started banging on the window. "Caroline, open up. Are you serious, Caroline?" Caroline didn't care. She put the car in gear, turned on her left signal, and slowly merged back onto the highway. In the rearview mirror, she could see the two figures, her husband and her mother-in-law, shouting, waving their arms, and then kicking the air in fury. Their silhouettes grew smaller and smaller, more blurred, until they finally disappeared around a curve and into the twilight. At mile marker 82, Caroline left her past behind. She left the burden she had been dragging. She left those who had drained her body and soul. She was alone. and for the first time in a very long time she felt free. The thunderous silence inside the car was deafening. After the roar of the engine and the wind as she accelerated, now there was only the monotonous hum of the climate control. The passenger seat was empty. The back seats, too. There were no more clicks of disapproval from Rose. No more video game sounds from Alex's phone. There was only Caroline and her thoughts. Her hands on the steering wheel began to tremble violently. It wasn't a tremor of anger, but the aftershock of a massive adrenaline dump. Her legs felt weak on the pedals. She had to stop. She needed a moment. The next service area appeared like an oasis in the desert. Caroline steered the car in and found the furthest parking spot, away from the trucks and people. As soon as she turned off the engine, her defenses crumbled. She rested her head on the steering wheel and burst into tears. They weren't tears of regret or sadness. It was a cry of absolute relief, a cleansing cry. Those tears seemed to wash away all the wounds, all the disappointments, and all the pain she had suppressed for years. She sobbed loudly, letting all the caged emotions out, without filters or restrictions. Her shoulders shook, and she struggled to breathe. She cried for the naive girl who once thought love could change everything. She cried for the hardworking woman whose efforts were never valued. She cried for herself for having finally found the strength to say, "Enough." After several minutes that felt like an eternity, her crying subsided, leaving only small hiccups. She lifted her head and looked at her swollen face in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were red and her hair was a mess. But behind all that, she saw something that had been lost a long time ago. A spark in her eyes. The spark of rebellion. She grabbed Alex's phone, still on the dashboard. The screen lit up showing dozens of missed calls from numbers saved as his relatives. Then she took her own phone out of her purse. As expected, it had dozens of notifications, calls, and messages from those same relatives. She glanced at a few that appeared on the lock screen. "Caroline, where are you? Did you leave Rose and Alex stranded? Pick up the phone. Don't be immature. You've crossed the line. Go back and get them right now." Caroline gave a cynical smile. How quickly they blamed her. No one asked what had really happened. No one asked why she did what she did. For her, that was the last proof she needed. The confirmation that she had made the right decision. Without hesitation, she pressed and held the power button on her phone until the option to turn it off appeared. The screen went black. The outside world was silenced. For now, she just wanted to be alone with herself. Meanwhile, dozens of miles away, Alex and Rose stood under the dim light of the newly lit highway lamps. Their faces, once full of fury, were now overcome with panic. The roar of huge trucks speeding by felt threatening. The night air was beginning to cool. "This is all your fault," Alex snapped at his mother. "If you hadn't been attacking Caroline the whole time, this wouldn't have happened." "Excuse me. Now it's my fault. You were the one who started screaming at her asking for a divorce. I was just giving her some advice." "You're so ungrateful," Rose retorted in a shrill voice. They bickered, blaming each other, not realizing how pathetic the scene was. Two people accustomed to living in comfort now, stranded in the middle of nowhere by their own arrogance. Alex tried to hitchhike, but no one was going to stop on the dark shoulder of an interstate. They might think they were robbers. Hunger began to twist their stomachs and thirst parched their throats. Alex felt his pockets, hoping to find a bill. Nothing. His wallet was in Caroline's car. His cards, his ID, everything was there. He had absolutely nothing. "What do we do now, Alex? I can't stand for much longer." "My legs hurt," Rose whined, almost crying. Alex ran his hands through his hair in frustration. He felt stupid. He felt helpless. Caroline had always been there to fix everything. Caroline would call an Uber. Caroline would pay for dinner. Caroline would solve the problem. Now Caroline was gone, and he was faced with his harsh reality. Without her, he was nothing. After nearly 2 hours, a state trooper patrol car saw them and pulled over. With immense shame, Alex told a heavily modified version of the events, saying they had argued and his wife had left them. The compassionate officers drove them to the nearest town with a bus station. From there, Alex had no choice but to call a cousin to send him a Venmo so he could buy bus tickets back to New York. That return trip felt like a humiliating penance. Meanwhile, Caroline had resumed her journey. Her mood was much calmer. Her mind was clear. The silence in the car was no longer oppressive but comforting. That silence was a space to think, a space to feel. During the rest of the drive, memories began to project in her head like an old movie. She passed a large billboard advertising new condos. She remembered the night she excitedly showed Alex the brochure for the house in Scarsdale she wanted to buy. She had just gotten a big promotion. "It's our investment, honey. For our future," she had said, full of hope. Alex barely glanced at the brochure and continued playing on his console. "Do whatever you want. You're the one with the money," he replied with indifference. The next day, when she went to sign the purchase agreement, only her name was on the document. Alex had refused to go, using the excuse that he couldn't be bothered dealing with the bank. A few miles later, she saw a busy family restaurant. Her memory flew to Rose's birthday the previous year. Caroline, who had just received a bonus, decided to treat Alex's entire family to dinner at an expensive restaurant in Manhattan. She wanted to please her mother-in-law, but all night she only heard complaints. "The steak is a bit tough, isn't it? The wine isn't very good. The waiters are taking forever." The final straw came with the bill. As Caroline paid with her credit card, Rose whispered to the aunt sitting next to her, loud enough for Caroline to hear. "This is what happens when you have a daughter-in-law with money. She's so arrogant you can't even see straight." That night, Caroline cried silently in the restaurant bathroom. She looked at the empty seat to her right where Alex used to sit. She remembered how many times she had picked him up from a bar or a late-night pickup basketball game after she had been working overtime at the office. He would get in the car smelling of sweat and beer, and fall asleep instantly while she fought off sleep to drive them home. There was never a thank you. There was never an "are you tired?" There was only a "wake me up late tomorrow. I'm exhausted." All those memories, which she once considered small pebbles in the shoe of her marriage, now seemed like giant boulders she had been carrying on her back. She realized how heavy her burden had been. She had worked hard to build a home, but she had been the only one laying the bricks. The others just sheltered under the roof while complaining that the walls weren't painted right or the floor didn't shine enough. When her car passed through the security gate of her subdivision, she felt something strange. This was her house, the house whose mortgage she paid religiously every month, the house whose furniture she had chosen piece by piece. But it had never felt like hers. There were always unwritten rules imposed by Rose when she came to stay for weeks on end. There was always the trail of Alex's laziness in every corner. She parked in the garage. She sat for a moment contemplating the facade of the house. Tonight, for the first time, she was going to take it back. She got out of the car, walked firmly to the front door, opened it, and went inside. The air inside the house felt different, lighter. She dropped her keys on the console table, kicked off her heels, and collapsed onto the plush living room sofa. She looked at the blank white ceiling, as blank as the life that lay ahead of her. A clean canvas she could paint however she wanted. No one would dictate what colors to use. No one would criticize her brushstrokes. The vibration of Alex's phone on the table snapped her out of her reverie. She picked it up. There was a new message from the same number. "Alex, where are you? Your mother and I just got to Port Authority. Come pick us up." Caroline read the message without feeling pity or guilt. She only felt a profound indifference. She put the phone back down. That was no longer her problem. She got up, went to the kitchen, and opened the fridge. She took out a bottle of very cold water and drank half of it in one gulp. It tasted like heaven. Then she grabbed her own phone, turned it on, and opened her contacts list. She looked for the number of the trusted local locksmith. "Hi, good evening. Sorry to bother you at this hour. Could you come to Scarsdale right now? I need to change the lock on my front door." The decision was made. There was no turning back. That night, when the click of the new deadbolt echoed through the house, Caroline knew she hadn't just locked Alex and Rose out of her house. She had locked out her dark past and opened the door to a bright future. She was alone in that huge house, but she had never felt so safe and so whole. That night, for the first time, Caroline slept in the center of her king-size bed. She no longer scrunched up on one side to leave a huge space for Alex, who used to come to bed in the early hours after getting tired of playing on the computer. That night, she stretched her limbs, felt the coolness of the sheets on her skin, and hugged the pillow with freedom. She slept deeply, without dreaming the best sleep she'd had in 5 years. The morning greeted her not with Alex's complaints about having to get up, nor with Rose's demands for breakfast, but with a peaceful silence and the rays of sun filtering through the curtains. Caroline opened her eyes slowly. For a few seconds, she felt disoriented, processing the emptiness around her. Then she remembered the highway, the call to the locksmith, and her decision. A small smile formed on her lips. She felt no remorse. She felt light. She got up and walked barefoot on the cool hardwood floor. Her steps led her to the immense walk-in closet. That piece of furniture was a silent witness. She opened the right side, her side rows of office, blouses, dresses, and casual clothes she had bought with her money, all neat and tidy. Then she opened the left side, Alex's side. The sight made her pause. Designer shirts, leather jackets, and denim jackets from J. Crew. Expensive designer t-shirts. On the bottom shelf, a collection of limited edition sneakers and leather shoes that cost as much as a mortgage payment. Almost everything, there was a gift from her for his birthday, as a consolation prize, because he was rejected in an interview, or simply because Alex got a whim when he saw a friend had something new. Her memory traveled to an afternoon in a luxury mall a year ago. Alex had pulled her arm to enter an exclusive boutique. "Honey, look at this jacket, it's awesome. It would be great for when I go to interviews at multinational corporations," he had said with shining eyes. Caroline looked at the price tag and almost choked. It was equivalent to 2 weeks of her salary. "Alex, this is too expensive," she whispered. His face soured instantly. "My God, you're so cheap, even with your own husband. I'm asking for this, to make a good impression, to look professional. It's for our future, right? If I get a good position, you'll benefit too." That twisted logic always worked. Caroline, who back then was still blinded by the hope that her husband would change, ended up swiping her credit card. The jacket was bought, but of course there was never any call from any multinational corporation. He only used it to show off at bars with his friends, whose rounds, by the way, he usually paid for with her money. Caroline reached out and touched the soft leather of the sleeve. She felt nothing. No resentment, no regret, just a cold, lucid clarity. She had been planting in the wrong field. She had been watering a parasitic plant. She closed the closet door slowly. She wasn't going to throw his things away. She would pack them up. They were all his, and he would have to come and get them. She walked to the kitchen. That modern, immaculate kitchen was her dream. She had designed it herself. She always imagined spending weekends there trying out new recipes with Alex. An illusion that never came true. For Alex, the kitchen was Caroline's territory. He never offered to help, not even to put his own plate in the dishwasher. The one who spent the most time there was Rose. Every time she came to visit visits that stretched for weeks, she didn't come to help but to inspect. Caroline opened the spice drawer. Everything was alphabetically arranged in glass jars. She remembered her mother-in-law's biting comment when she first saw it. "Dear, it looks like you're going to open a grocery store with all these labels. When I cook, I do it by feel and with love. That's why my food tastes better." Then Rose would start cooking, which meant Caroline had to peel garlic, clean the fish, and prepare all the ingredients while Rose gave orders sitting on a stool. In the end, she would serve the plate to her son, saying with pride, "Look, son, your mother's food. I bet you missed real home cooking." Honestly, women today don't know how to make a good stew. Alex would eat greedily, praising his mother to the heavens without even looking at Caroline, who was sweating in a corner of the kitchen cleaning up the mess the woman had left. Caroline took a pot, filled it with water, and put it on the induction stovetop. She opened a cabinet and took out a packet of ramen noodles. She hadn't eaten them in months. Alex and Rose considered them junk food, food for the poor. Ironically, they never contributed a single cent to buy the healthy, expensive food they always demanded. While waiting for the water to boil, she leaned against the counter, her eyes fixed on a digital frame on the fridge that displayed a slideshow of their memories. There were photos from their wedding. Caroline looked so happy. Her eyes radiated love and hope. Alex smiled broadly by her side, looking handsome and promising. Who would have thought that behind that smile hid infinite laziness and a massive sense of entitlement? A photo of their trip to Japan from 3 years ago appeared, a trip entirely funded by Caroline's annual bonus. She remembered how she had to work like crazy for months, meeting impossible goals to afford Alex's whim to go to Kyoto. During the trip, he just enjoyed himself, while Caroline constantly had to check her phone to answer urgent emails. Are you here to have fun or to work? Always thinking about the same thing, Alex had reprimanded her without a hint of guilt. The photo changed again. This time it was the housewarming party. In the photo, she and Alex were flanked by their respective parents. Caroline's parents smiled with pride. Rose, though smiling for the camera, clutched her son's arm tightly as if wanting to make it clear that this house was his, not her daughter-in-law's. After the party, when the guests left, Rose took her aside. I'm going to give you some advice. Now that you have your own house, remember that this is Alex's house. You are here thanks to your husband, so you have to be smart and take good care of him. Don't let your work make you neglect the house and make him unhappy. Caroline, trying to be the good daughter-in-law, just nodded with a tense smile. Inside, she wanted to scream that every brick and every bag of cement had been paid for with her sweat, that the name on the deed was hers, that it was Alex who was living thanks to her. But she held back to keep the peace for love. The water was boiling. Caroline added the noodles and stirred slowly. The aroma of cheap spices filled the kitchen. A simple, honest, and unpretentious smell just like the life she wanted now. After a breakfast that tasted glorious, she took her cup of coffee to a room she rarely entered, Alex's office. Originally, she had planned it as a study for both of them. She had put in 2 desks. Hers was tidy with her laptop documents and organized pens. Alex's was a cave filled with monitors, video game cases, and a high-end PC he had built a year ago. "It's for job hunting, honey. To update my LinkedIn profile and network," he had justified. But that room had never seen a resume. It was his gaming den. Many nights, while Caroline slept exhausted, Alex was still there, yelling into his microphone at his virtual friends until dawn. On the wall hung a whiteboard. Traces of Caroline's handwriting remained the fertility treatment schedule she had made 2 years ago. Doctor's appointments, vitamin schedules, fertile days, all written with care and hope. Her mind went back to the day that hope was destroyed. In the cold gynecologist's office, the doctor patiently explained that her condition made ovulation difficult. "It doesn't mean you can't get pregnant, but it will require extra effort. There are several treatment options. And the most important thing is the absolute support of your husband," the doctor said, looking at Alex. Caroline squeezed his hand, seeking strength, but his hand was limp and cold. On the way home, he barely spoke. When they arrived and Caroline tried to bring up the topic, he exploded. "I knew it. It's because you're so stressed from your damn job, from being so ambitious. You care more about your career than your own health. Look at you. It's your fault we're in this situation." There was no comfort, no hugs, only accusations. Alex twisted the medical facts to make them Caroline's fault. He used her condition as a weapon to attack her professional success, something that had always wounded his fragile ego. From that day on, Alex refused to talk about treatments. Let it be. If God wants it, it will happen. And if not, then nothing. Standing in that room in front of the whiteboard that was a monument to her broken hope, Caroline no longer felt pain. She felt relief. She thanked heaven for not having had a child with a man like Alex. She couldn't imagine raising a child in such a toxic environment with a father who would never be a good role model. She picked up the eraser and with a firm movement wiped the board completely clean white and empty like her future. She spent the rest of the day doing things she loved. She played classical music loudly, opened all the windows to let in fresh air, and watered the plants on the terrace that were beginning to wilt. She felt every corner of that house become hers again. The walls that once seemed to mock her with bitter memories now whispered strength to her. This was her territory, her palace, and she was the only queen there. She knew they would show up soon. Alex and Rose would arrive at her door, but she wasn't afraid. For the first time, she was ready to face them without tears, without doubts, armed only with the truth. As evening fell, an Uber stopped in front of the house. The back door opened, and Alex got out, followed by Rose. Their appearance was far from presentable. Alex's hair was disheveled, and the shirt he had worn since yesterday was dirty and wrinkled. Rose's face was haggard from exhaustion, but her eyes still burned with anger. They walked quickly to the front door. Alex, with what little arrogance he had left, didn't even bother to ring the bell. He reached into his pocket, took out his key, and tried to insert it into the lock. He pushed, but it wouldn't go in. He tried again with more force. Nothing. "What's wrong with this?" "The lock is stuck," he muttered, pushing violently. Rose, whose patience was non-existent, shoved her son aside. "Move, you useless oaf, let me." She snatched the key and did the same. The result was identical. "This door is locked from the inside." She did it on purpose. Caroline opened the door. Alex began to shout, pounding on the heavy wooden door. His voice echoed in the quiet subdivision. Some neighbors watering their gardens began to peek out curiously. "Open the door, don't be a terrible wife, open up or I'll break the door down," Rose shrieked in her high-pitched voice, not caring about the scene they were making. Inside the house, Caroline heard everything. She was sitting on the sofa, sipping a hot tea. Her heart was beating a little faster, but her hand wasn't shaking at all. She knew this would happen. She took a deep breath, set her cup on the table, and calmly went up to the second floor, approaching the window directly above the entrance. She moved the curtain slightly, just enough to see the scene. A pathetic but tremendously satisfying image. The husband and mother-in-law, who had always belittled her, now looked like vagrants begging to enter her house. When there was no answer, Alex became even more enraged and kicked the door several times. "Caroline, I told you to open up. This is my house too. I have rights." It was then that Caroline decided to show herself. She opened the window slowly. The slight creak made Alex and Rose look up. Their eyes widened when they saw Caroline standing there, looking down at them from above with an inscrutable expression. "Ah, you finally show your face, you shameless hussy," Rose spat, pointing a finger at her. "Get down here right now and open this door. Do you want the whole neighborhood to laugh at us?" Caroline ignored her mother-in-law's fury, her eyes fixed on Alex. "What did you say, Alex? That this is your house too?" she asked. Her voice sounded clear and serene amidst the commotion. "Of course it is. I'm your husband. I'm the head of the family," he yelled back, trying to reclaim his authority. Caroline smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Forgive me for correcting you. First, very soon, you will no longer be my husband. Second, this house, from the foundation to the roof tiles, was paid for with my money. The name on the property deed is Caroline Navarro. Your name doesn't appear anywhere, so you have absolutely no rights here." The words spoken with calm, surgical precision hit Alex like a slap. He paled. He knew Caroline was right. He had never contributed a single dollar to the mortgage. "Don't listen to her, son. She's just trying to scare you," Rose hissed, although deep down she also knew it was true. Caroline ignored her and continued. "You can't come in. I changed the locks last night." "What? You changed the locks? Are you kicking me out of my house?" Alex roared in disbelief. "I'm not kicking you out," Caroline replied, with the patience of someone speaking to a child. "I'm just taking back what's mine. You were the ones who decided to leave. Remember yesterday at mile marker 82, you were the one who dared me to ask for a divorce. I'm simply granting you your wish." Rose began to cry dramatically. "Oh my God! Look what this woman is doing to us. After everything we've given her, this is how she repays us. What an ungrateful wretch." Caroline almost laughed. What had they given her? Heartache, a financial drain, and humiliation? "You'd better leave," Caroline said, her tone hardening, "before I call subdivision security to escort you out." The threat silenced them. The security guards in that area were known for not messing around. Being humiliated in front of the neighbors was bad enough. Being dragged away by security would be the end of the world. Seeing them hesitate, Caroline closed the window and went downstairs. A few minutes later, she opened the front door. Not all the way, just enough to push out 2 large suitcases and a duffel bag. She left them on the porch at their feet. "What's this?" Alex asked, stunned. "Your things. All your clothes and personal items, at least the most important ones. You can arrange to pick up the rest later through my lawyer," Caroline explained. That gesture, the fact that their bags were packed, was the final blow. It was tangible proof that she wasn't bluffing. This was the end. Alex looked at the suitcases and then at Caroline's cold face. All his anger seemed to evaporate, replaced by a chilling panic. "Caroline, please don't do this." His voice softened, becoming a whine. "We can talk about this like civilized people. I'm sorry. I lost my temper yesterday." "It's too late for apologies, Alex," she replied. "Your temper tantrum yesterday only showed what's truly in your heart." Alex tried to take her hand, but Caroline stepped back, maintaining the distance marked by the threshold of the door. "And to make sure you don't bother me again," she said, pulling out her phone. She showed him the screen. "I've emptied our joint account and blocked it. All the additional credit cards in your name have been canceled. Oh, and your cell phone line. I guess you've run out of data because the contract was also in my name and I just terminated it." Alex instinctively pulled his phone from his pocket and tried to open his banking app. Error. No connection. He tried to make a call. No service. He was completely disconnected, isolated. The blow was devastating. His face went from panic to desperation. He looked at Caroline, pleading. "But, what am I supposed to do now?" For the first time, Caroline felt a small twinge of compassion, not out of pity, but for the remnants of the woman who had once loved him. She sighed and hardened her heart again. "That's not my problem anymore. You're a grown man. You're the head of the family, aren't you? So figure it out." With those words, Caroline closed the door. She didn't slam it. She closed it slowly and firmly. The sound of the key turning in the lock from the inside sounded final. Outside, Alex and Rose stood frozen, humiliated, evicted, and cut off from all financial resources, surrounded by suitcases stranded in front of the house they would never set foot in again. Night was beginning to fall, and the streetlights flickered on. They had nowhere to go, no money, and nothing but each other. From behind the curtain, Caroline watched them. She saw Alex slump onto one of the suitcases, burying his head in his hands. Rose, completely disoriented, paced for a moment before sitting next to her son. They looked minuscule and defeated. Caroline didn't feel a sadistic triumph, only immense relief. A huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She turned away from the window. She walked to the center of her living room, which now seemed immense and brimming with peace. She had won the first battle. She knew the real war was just beginning, but she wasn't afraid. She was ready. That night, Alex and Rose had no choice but to call the only relative who could take them in Aunt Patty, Rose's sister. After a dramatic haggle with the Uber driver that a security guard had kindly called for them, they arrived at Aunt Patty's apartment in an old building in Queens. The apartment was the antithesis of Caroline's house, small, cluttered, and noisy. As soon as the door opened, Rose launched into her theatrical mode. She burst into loud sobs, hugging her sister as if she had just survived a shipwreck. Alex followed behind her, putting on his best-kicked puppy face. In the cramped living room, sitting on a worn-out sofa covered with an old slipcover, the propaganda campaign began. "You're not going to believe this," Patty Rose sobbed, forcing a hoarse, trembling voice. "My daughter-in-law, Caroline. She's the devil himself. She's kicked us out, Patty. Kicked us out of our own home like stray dogs." Aunt Patty, a simple woman who had always looked up to her sister and nephew for their high standard of living, was in shock. She handed her sister a glass of water. "What do you mean she kicked you out, Rose? What happened?" "The problem is, she's become arrogant," Alex interjected quickly, taking control of the narrative. "Ever since she started doing well at her company, she's lost her mind. She doesn't respect me as a husband anymore. My mother tried to give her some friendly advice, and she went crazy. The final straw was yesterday. Over some stupid thing in the car. She had the nerve to leave my mother and me stranded in the middle of the highway." Alex, of course, omitted the small detail that he was the one who had screamed for a divorce. He painted Caroline as a heartless monster, who had abandoned a loving husband and a poor old woman in a dangerous place. She thinks that because she's the one bringing in the salary, she can do whatever she wants. She's forgotten what respect means, Rose added, dabbing at crocodile tears. That house, the car, the money. It's blinded her. She doesn't want to have children so they don't mess up her career. She's become one of those radical feminists. Oh, Patty, I feel so sorry for my son having to put up with a woman like that. The story, made of half-truths and outright lies, sounded completely convincing to Aunt Patty and her husband, Uncle Tony, who was listening from the doorway. They only saw the surface. They saw Alex, who always came to family dinners dressed in brand-name clothes. They saw Rose bragging to her friends about how successful her family's life was. They never knew who was really paying for that facade. That same night, the news of Caroline's cruelty spread like wildfire. It all started with a call from Aunt Patty to several cousins. Soon after, the topic hit the entire family's group text. The messages began to flood the screen. "Oh my God, did she really do that? Some women these days, money goes straight to their heads. Poor Alex and Rose. What a lack of respect. You should treat your mother-in-law like your own mother. She has no shame. She should thank God she has such a patient man by her side." Caroline, who had just taken a shower and was getting ready for bed, felt her phone vibrating nonstop. She looked at the screen. Dozens of notifications from the family group chat she had muted. Curiosity prompted her to open the app, and there she saw it. They were digitally assassinating her reputation. She read every message. But surprisingly, her heart no longer felt pain, only exhaustion. How easy it was for these people to judge her without hearing her side of the story. How quickly they sided with the most dramatic tale. Shortly after, a call came in from Uncle Frank, the oldest brother of Alex's father, the most respected patriarch in the family. Caroline took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Uncle Frank. Caroline, I've heard some very unpleasant news through Patty. Is it true you've thrown Alex and his mother out of the house?" The voice on the other end was grave and demanding. "I haven't thrown anyone out, Uncle. I simply asked them to leave my house," Caroline replied, measuring her words. "And what's the difference? That's your house, both of yours. In a marriage, if there are problems, you solve them by talking. You don't throw people out on the street like that. It's a disgrace to the whole family, Uncle. This problem is too complex to be solved by talking. At this point," she said, maintaining a calm tone, "there's nothing that can't be solved. You as the woman should be the one to bend. Tone down that attitude. Apologize to your husband. Go get them and fix this." "I hate seeing them crammed into that little apartment in Queens." Caroline was silent for a second. She imagined herself doing that, going to get them, bringing them back to the house, so that everything would go back to being exactly the same. She would go back to being the ATM, the maid, the punching bag for their insults. Her stomach turned just thinking about it. I can't do that, Uncle. My decision is final, she replied firmly. Caroline, don't be stubborn. What do you want? To be a divorcee? For people to speak ill of you? Think about it. Uncle Frank raised his voice. I appreciate the advice, Uncle, but this is my life and I know what's best for me. Good night. Caroline hung up before the man could reply. Her hands were trembling slightly. Going against an entire family required Herculean mental strength. She archived the family group chat and tossed her phone on the sofa. She needed to breathe. Just then, another call came in. This time it was her own sister, Lucy. Caroline hesitated, fearing another identical lecture, but finally answered. Carol, are you okay? Lucy's voice sounded worried but not accusatory. Yeah, Luce, I'm okay, she replied, her voice a bit hoarse. I don't believe a single word of what they're saying in his family's group chat. I know there has to be a good reason. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over? Hearing those simple words, Caroline's defenses crumbled a little. A tear slid down her cheek, a tear of gratitude. In the midst of the storm of judgment, someone was offering her a hand. Don't worry, I'm just very tired, she whispered. Get some rest, sis. Ignore them. I'm with you 100%. If you need anything anytime you call me. That call was like a soothing balm. Caroline knew she wasn't alone. Her sister's support gave her new energy. She wasn't going to let her in-laws' smear campaign bring her down. She had to move to take firm steps to protect herself. The next morning, after an emotional roller coaster of a night, Caroline dressed up more than usual. She put on her best pantsuit and applied subtle makeup to hide the ravages of exhaustion. She had an important appointment. She drove her car to a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. In the lobby, she looked for the law firm's name on the directory, Lara and Associates. She had an appointment with a lawyer named Beatrice, a family law expert recommended by a friend famous for being relentless in court. In a glass-walled office with sober tones, Caroline sat across from Beatrice, a woman in her 40s, with a sharp professional gaze. Tell me, Caroline, what happened? Beatrice asked in a conciliatory tone. And Caroline told her everything. From the beginning of her marriage, Alex's refusal to hold down a job, how she had taken on 100% of the expenses, the psychological abuse from her mother-in-law, and how they had used her fertility issues to attack. To her, she showed Beatrice the evidence she had brought. In a folder, her pay stubs for the last 5 years, bank statements, mortgage and car payment records, and even receipts from Alex's credit cards that she paid off. Finally, she reached the climax. In the car on the way back to New York, he dared me to ask for a divorce, Beatrice. So I granted him his wish, Caroline concluded. The lawyer nodded slowly, looking at her with genuine admiration. You are a very brave woman, and you did the right thing by coming here immediately. Beatrice proceeded to explain the legal steps filing the divorce petition in family court, preparing all the documentation about their financial situation. Even in an equitable distribution state like New York, if we can prove the house was purchased before the marriage, it's your separate property. Your savings will trace them back to your employment income. Also, I advise you to cut off all direct communication. From now on, everything goes through me. They will try to pressure you psychologically through your family. Stay firm. Leaving that office, Caroline felt as if half the weight of the world had disappeared from her shoulders. She was no longer fighting alone. She had a legal shield. She had ammunition in the form of facts and papers. The cheap gossip from her husband's family would bounce right off her. She had signed a retainer giving Beatrice power of attorney. The war had just begun, but she had an excellent general on her side. Life at Aunt Patty's house was hell for Alex. He had to share a tiny room with 2 teenage cousins. The apartment had no air conditioning, only an old box fan that stirred the hot New York summer air. He had no privacy. Every day he endured passive-aggressive jabs from his aunt about the electricity bill or how quickly the food in the fridge disappeared. Rose wasn't any better. Her status as the rich sister-in-law had vanished. Now she was just a burden. At her sister's house, she had to wash dishes and clean something she hadn't done in years. Alex was desperate. The money his cousin had Venmoed him was already gone. His pride was shattered. In his desperation, he remembered the only ace he thought he had up his sleeve, Vanessa, the receptionist at the exclusive gym he used to go to, whose membership, of course, was paid by Caroline. Vanessa was young, attractive, and always seemed to admire him. Alex used to invite her to dinner or give her small gifts, selling her the image of a successful young executive. Vanessa was the main reason he had been so arrogant in demanding a divorce. In his childish fantasies, he would get divorced, take half of Caroline's assets, and start a lavish life with Vanessa. Using his aunt's phone, he called her. "Hey Vanessa, it's Alex. Listen, sorry, I've been MIA these past few days." "My phone broke," he started with a lie. "Oh, Alex, I was waiting for you to call. How's everything?" Vanessa's sweet voice instantly lifted his spirits. "Good. Just dealing with some family stuff." "Hey, are you free this afternoon? We should meet up. I have something really important to tell you." "Well, my shift ends soon." "I'm free. Where should we meet?" Alex swallowed hard. He couldn't invite her to a trendy place downtown. He was broke. "How about the TGI Fridays at the mall? I'm in the mood for something casual today." He tried to sound nonchalant. "Okay, see you there." That afternoon, after borrowing a few bucks from his mother for an interview, Alex took an endless subway ride. He who was used to getting around in a gleaming SUV was now sweating on the 7 trains squeezed against strangers. The first slap of reality. He arrived at the mall before her. He chose a table in the back, ordered a Coke, and waited nervously. Soon, Vanessa appeared as stylish as ever. She sat down and smiled at him. "So what's this important thing you had to tell me?" Alex cleared his throat, mustering his courage. "Vanessa, I want to be honest with you. I've never told you about my marital status." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "I'm married," he quickly added. "But my marriage is dead. We're not even living together anymore. We're in the middle of a divorce." Vanessa didn't seem shocked, but rather curious. "Oh, really? And why are you getting a divorce?" "She's a workaholic. We don't have the same priorities. She doesn't give me what I need in a relationship," he lied, playing the victim again. "And to be frank, one of the reasons I took this step is because I've found someone much better, someone who really gets me." He looked into her eyes intensely. Vanessa smiled slyly. "Are you talking about me?" Alex nodded. "Yes. When the divorce is final, I want us to be serious." Vanessa's face lit up. Her fantasy of living comfortably with a businessman seemed about to come true. "And will the paperwork take long? What about the division of assets?" And that's where Alex made his most foolish mistake. Carried away by his own ego, he started to brag. "Nah, it'll be quick. And don't worry about the money. Everything is in both our names, the house, the car, the savings. The judge will have to give me 50%. I'll take my share and we'll have a nice nest egg to start over." Vanessa's mind raced, imagining the loot. But as a pragmatic woman, she started connecting the dots. "Hey, and that house you have, it's big, right? Where is it?" "In Scarsdale. But you know, right now, while the process is ongoing, I've moved in with an aunt of mine just to not create more tension with her," he excused himself. Vanessa frowned. "Oh, okay. And the car, you have it right. She has the car for now, you know, to keep things amicable," he lied. "So, I'm getting around by public transport. Helps me avoid the traffic," he forced a smile. Alarm bells started ringing in Vanessa's head. The story didn't add up. A rich guy who was about to inherit half a fortune living with his aunt and taking the subway. "Hey Alex, and what are you doing for work now? Because you told me you were going to leave your company for another one." "Yeah, well, I'm in the middle of interviews. I'll get hired somewhere any day now, don't worry." A drop of cold sweat trickled down his temple. Vanessa looked at him intently. She wasn't stupid. She could smell the fear on the man in front of her. The mask of the successful executive had just shattered. "Let me get this straight, Alex. So right now, you don't have a dime, you don't have a car, you're unemployed, and you're crashing at your aunt's place. Is that right?" she asked, directly, without sugarcoating. The question stripped him bare. There was nowhere to hide. "Well, temporarily, yes, but only until the divorce is final. Then everything will go back to normal," he pleaded, almost pathetically. Vanessa leaned back in her chair. Her sweet smile had vanished, replaced by a look of profound coldness. She had the answer she needed. Alex wasn't a Prince Charming. He was a deadbeat bum whose wife had just kicked him to the curb. Everything he bragged about wasn't his. "I see," she said dryly. She looked at her watch. "Wow, I completely forgot I had plans with a friend. I have to go now." She didn't even wait for him to reply. She stood up and grabbed her purse. "Wait, Vanessa. We haven't finished talking," Alex said, getting to his feet. Vanessa shot him a look of ice he had never seen before. "I think we're done here. Good luck with your divorce, champ." She turned and walked away quickly, disappearing into the mall crowd. Alex slumped back into his chair, devastated. He looked at his watered-down Coke. Its sweetness now tasted like bile. He felt like the most idiotic human being on the planet. He had thrown away Caroline, the woman who gave him everything, to chase a hollow fantasy with Vanessa. Now the fantasy was shattered, and he had absolutely nothing left. No wife, no house, no car, no money, no dignity, no mistress. Everything lost in less than 48 hours because of his own blindness and arrogance. Sitting there under the cold fluorescent lights, he began to understand the depth of the hole he had dug for himself. The following weeks passed in a very productive silence for Caroline. Once the initial earthquake and the family harassment campaign had subsided, especially after Beatrice, her lawyer sent a couple of cease and desist letters to the most vocal relatives, she began to find a new rhythm of life, a rhythm marked by her own desires, and not by others' demands. Her house, which once felt like a five-star hotel for her husband and mother-in-law, slowly transformed into a sanctuary for her soul. She started with small details. She moved the enormous armchair where Alex used to lounge and hid it in a corner. In its place, she put a beautiful reading chair by the window and a large bookshelf filled with novels she had bought but never had time to read. She deep-cleaned Alex's empty side of the closet, removing the musty smell, sprayed it with lavender air freshener, and used it to neatly arrange her collection of handbags and scarves. The space that once represented neglect now symbolized self-love. One weekend, guided by an impulse she had suppressed for years, she went to an art supply store. She stood in front of the canvases and tubes of acrylic paint. She remembered that before she got married, she loved to paint. She was no expert, but mixing colors brought her a sense of peace. She had stopped after Alex laughed at her paintings. "What is that? It's just a bunch of smudges." "Couldn't you use that time to learn how to cook properly?" he had sneered. No one would ever mock her again. She bought an easel and plenty of supplies. When she got home, she covered the living room floor with newspaper, put on instrumental music, and started to paint. She had no sketch in mind. She simply poured her emotions onto the canvas, dark blue for the pain, fiery red for the rage, yellow for hope, and white for her new chapter. She painted for hours, forgetting the clock and food, ending up with her hands stained. When she stepped back, she didn't see a museum masterpiece. She saw a beautiful chaos. She saw her own soul healing. She smiled. Her rebirth didn't just happen at home. She began to open up to her friends again, the ones she had so neglected. One night, she agreed to have dinner with Laura and Marta, her two best friends from college, whom she had drifted away from because she always had to cancel plans to cater to Alex or his mother. They met at a cozy Italian restaurant in the city. When Caroline told them what had happened, no drama, just the facts, she received absolute support. "Caroline, I swear we've been biting our tongues for years," Laura said, grabbing her hand. "We saw how you were working yourself to the bone while he lived off you." "Totally," Marta agreed. "When you told us he wouldn't go to the fertility clinics and then blamed you, I knew that guy was worthless. You deserve 1,000 times better. Or rather, you deserve to get yourself back." That night they laughed out loud. They talked about movies, gossiped their jobs. For the first time in a long time, Caroline felt part of something authentic. She didn't have to measure her words or protect anyone's fragile ego. When she got home, her cheeks hurt from laughing so much. That positive energy spread to her professional life. At the office, everyone noticed the change. She seemed radiant, smiled more, and was ultra-focused. With the mental weight lifted, her mind worked with more clarity and creativity. In a crucial meeting to land a new account, Caroline shone. She delivered her presentation with crushing confidence, answering the client's questions with audacity. Her boss, Mr. Daniels, who had always considered her an efficient but very discreet employee, looked at her with renewed respect. "A brilliant presentation, Caroline," he congratulated her afterward. "I didn't know you had that kind of drive. This project is yours. Lead the team." That recognition tasted like victory. For years, Alex and Rose had made her believe that her professional ambition was a flaw, the root of all their marital problems. Now she saw with crystal clarity that her job wasn't the problem. It was her lifeline. Her career was hers, the fruit of her intelligence. It was something to be immensely proud of. Sometimes, while sipping tea in the morning or finishing a painting, an image of her ex-husband and mother-in-law would cross her mind. What were they doing? She pictured them crammed into the little apartment in Queens, complaining about everything. She imagined Alex bitter about being broke and Rose unable to brag about her daughter-in-law at the hair salon. A pang of pity would strike, but it evaporated quickly. She remembered that their situation was a direct result of their own actions. She had given them 1,000 chances. She had sacrificed herself almost to the point of erasure. Now it was her turn to be selfish and look out for her own happiness. The real triumph wasn't leaving them on I-95. The real liberation was the process that came after learning to love herself, surrounding herself with peace, and looking in the mirror to see a whole, strong, and happy woman on her own terms. While Caroline's world was being reborn, Alex's was falling apart. Vanessa's rejection was the final blow. He had lost his only escape route, his saving fantasy. Now, only harsh reality remained. He was a man in his 40s with no job and no prospects, living off the charity of relatives who grew more resentful by the day. Aunt Patty no longer held back. "So how long are you going to keep this up, Alex? Find something, anything. Your mother is getting older and you can't just stay here freeloading forever." Every comment was a whip to his shattered pride. In his desperation, his brain could only conjure one name: Caroline. He had to get her back, not for love but for pure survival. She was his safety net, his ticket back to a comfortable life. He began his harassment strategy. Dozens of messages from his cousin's borrowed phone. First, he tried remorse. "Caroline, forgive me. I was an idiot. The stress got to me. I miss you." Read no reply. Beatrice had forbidden Caroline from responding. He moved on to nostalgic manipulation. "Remember when we went to the Catskills that first year? It was pouring rain, and we ate at that little diner. We were so happy. Are you going to throw all that away?" Absolute silence. Frustrated, he resorted to emotional blackmail. "I hear you're doing great. I'm happy for you. Don't worry about me and my mother suffering over here. My mom's blood pressure is through the roof from all the stress you've caused. If something happens to her, let's see if you can sleep at night." He was convinced this last one would work. Caroline had always been respectful of family, but the phone remained silent. She wasn't taking the bait. Seeing her son fail, Rose decided to take action, staging her classic drama. One afternoon, she lay down in bed, pulled the covers up to her chin, and began to groan, pretending she couldn't breathe. "Patty, Patty," she called out to her sister in an agonized voice. "Call Caroline, please. I want to talk to her. I want to apologize before I die." Aunt Patty, terrified, quickly dialed Caroline's number. Caroline was in the middle of a meeting, but seeing the aunt's number, she stepped into the hallway. She could smell the trap. "Caroline, for God's sake," Aunt Patty shouted. "Something's happening to Rose. She's really sick, burning up, can't breathe. All she's asking is for you to come so she can apologize." Caroline remained silent, analyzing the situation. Her gut screamed. It was pure theater, but a small voice whispered, "What if it's true?" She remembered her lawyer's advice. Offer logical solutions, zero emotional involvement, and absolutely no physical presence. "Aunt Patty, if Rose is that seriously ill, don't waste another second. Call 911. Take her to the emergency room immediately," Caroline responded, her voice cool but polite. "But she just wants to see you, Auntie. I'm not a doctor." "Doctors cure the sick," Caroline cut her off. "If there's anything to pay at the hospital, or if she needs a private specialist, don't worry. Send the bills to my lawyer. Beatrice and I'll take care of everything. The important thing is that a medical professional sees her urgently." Aunt Patty was speechless. The response was impeccable. Caroline was showing concern, offering to pay for medical care, but masterfully dodging the trap of running to them in tears. "Oh, okay. Well, we'll see," the aunt stammered, deflated. Rose's act ended right there. Her plan to have Caroline show up distraught had failed, and her ex-daughter-in-law's cold response only made it clearer who held all the cards. Seeing that none of his veiled tactics worked, Alex lost it. If he couldn't manipulate her, he would ruin her reputation. He would humiliate her in public. The next day, during the morning rush hour, he showed up at the skyscraper where Caroline worked. His appearance was deplorable, shabby clothes, unshaven, with a crazed look in his eyes. He tried to get past the security turnstiles, but the guards stopped him. "Good morning, sir. Where are you headed?" One guard blocked his path. "I'm here to see Caroline Navarro. She's my wife," Alex shouted, drawing the stares of all the office workers in the lobby. "I'm sorry, sir. Access is prohibited without an appointment or badge." "Caroline, I know you're up there. Show your face, you coward," he began to bellow, completely unhinged. The receptionist immediately called Caroline's office. "Excuse me, Miss Navarro. There's a man at reception claiming to be your husband. He's shouting and causing a scene." Caroline's heart skipped a beat. The initial fear and shame paralyzed her. She imagined all her colleagues watching the embarrassing spectacle. But that fear quickly morphed into an icy rage. How dare he bring his toxicity to her professional sanctuary? She wasn't going to hide. "Thank you for letting me know." Please have the security guards on standby. I'm coming down now. Caroline exited the elevator and crossed the massive marble lobby with her head held high, impeccably dressed in her suit. As she approached the turnstiles, she saw Alex struggling with two security guards. "Alex," she said, her voice low but with a cutting firmness. He turned. Seeing her, he tried to put on his kicked puppy face again. "Caroline, honey, you finally came down. We need to talk, I'm begging you." Caroline held up a hand ordering him to stop. The guards were 2 feet away. "First of all, don't call me honey," she said, fixing him with a glacial stare. "Second, this is a private company and my place of work. You have no right to come here and create a circus." "But I'm your husband," he shrieked, looking at the curious onlookers to garner sympathy. "Our legal matters are being handled by our lawyers in court. You know perfectly well you are not to contact me," Caroline declared in a firm, professional voice. "I demand that you leave the building immediately." "I'm not leaving until we talk. You threw me and my mother out on the street," he roared hysterically. Caroline didn't even flinch. She wasn't going to stoop to his level and have a shouting match. She looked at the head of security. "Please escort this gentleman outside. If he resists, call the NYPD for disorderly conduct." Caroline's executive coolness left Alex petrified. He had expected tears or shouting. Not this version of Caroline in titanium armor. When the guards grabbed his arms to remove him, what little dignity he had left vanished. Humiliated in front of dozens of well-dressed professionals, he didn't resist. He let himself be dragged toward the revolving glass doors. Caroline watched him until he disappeared onto the sidewalk of Park Avenue. Then she turned to her colleagues who were watching, gave a slight nod and said, "I deeply apologize for this incident. You may all return to your work." She walked back toward the elevators, her back straighter than ever. This had been her definitive declaration of war. The next time they saw each other would be in front of a judge, and she was more than ready. The day of the court hearing felt like Judgment Day. The hallways of the family court were saturated with tension, broken hopes, and lawyers negotiating in hushed tones. Caroline walked with a firm step alongside Beatrice. She wore an impeccable navy blue suit. She wasn't nervous. She was prepared. The battle was no longer emotional. It was purely bureaucratic, and she held the winning hand. At the end of the hallway, she saw them, Alex and Rose. They were the very picture of defeat. Alex wore a wrinkled shirt that was too big for him. His face was haggard, and his eyes stared into space. Rose, who used to be decked out in shiny costume jewelry and heavy makeup, wore a threadbare coat and a washed-out face. Beside them stood a legal aid lawyer, Mr. Morales, who looked like he couldn't wait for the proceedings to be over. Their eyes met. Caroline saw resentment in Rose's and pure defeat in Alex's. She maintained a stoic expression and looked away. Let the papers do the talking. They entered the room for the pre-trial settlement conference, a long wooden table with a mediating judge at its head. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Navarro," the judge began in a routine voice. "Before we proceed, the law requires us to attempt mediation. Is there any possibility of reconciling this marriage?" Alex's lawyer, Mr. Morales, quickly spoke up. "Your Honor, my client deeply desires to reconcile. The previous incidents were the result of a heated argument, and he is willing to apologize." Beatrice cut him off with a slight shark-like smile. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the apologies are too late. My client, Miss Navarro, has been the victim of continuous psychological abuse and financial exploitation. Her decision is unmovable. We demand a contested divorce if no agreement is reached." The judge nodded, seeing there was nothing to gain here. "Very well, let's move on to the financial matters. What is the plaintiff requesting?" Here, the show began. Morales adjusted his glasses. "Your Honor, the couple has been married for 5 years. During that time, they acquired a house in Scarsdale, an SUV, and have savings. We understand that they are subject to equitable distribution laws, and we request 50% of the divisible assets. Furthermore, although my client has been unemployed for some time, his contribution to the household has been one of moral support and maintenance of the residence, which case law recognizes as a contribution to the marriage." Alex sat up straighter in his chair. This was his moment of hope, half of everything. But Beatrice was barely fazed. She opened a leather briefcase and pulled out 3 thick files, dropping them on the table with a dull thud that sounded like a hammer blow to Alex's chest. "Your Honor, let's talk about documentary evidence," Beatrice said in a sharp voice. "Exhibit A, the property deed for the residence located in Scarsdale. As you can see, the date of purchase is 2 years before the marriage, and it is exclusively in the name of Miss Caroline Navarro. As it was acquired prior to the marriage, it is 100% the separate property of my client. The other party has no right to it whatsoever. Alex's and Rose's jaws dropped. They knew Caroline had paid for everything, but in their legal ignorance, they believed marriage made everything community property. Beatrice placed the second file on the table. Exhibit B, the title and bill of sale for the SUV. It was paid for in cash 3 years ago. I have attached the money trail here, a direct transfer from my client's separate savings account funded by her employment bonuses. Under state law, assets acquired with separate funds retain that status. It is also not part of the marital estate. The judge reviewed the papers, nodding slightly. And finally, Beatrice dropped the thickest dossier bank statements from the last 5 years. As you can see, Your Honor, 100% of the income is from Miss Navarro's salary. All living expenses for the couple and for the mother-in-law present here who spent long periods at the residence came from that money. This includes, of course, the purchase of video game consoles, luxury clothing, and leisure expenses for Mr. Navarro. Opposing counsel spoke of moral support. I would call it absolute parasitism. A lethal silence fell over the room. Alex was ashen, sunk in his chair. Rose wrung her hands in her lap until her knuckles were white. Therefore, Your Honor, Beatrice concluded impeccably, the request for a 50% split is a legal fantasy. All valuable assets are the separate property of my client. We are here solely to dissolve the marital bond. My client, in an act of extreme generosity to avoid prolonging the process, is willing to offer a single, minimal compensatory payment, a symbolic amount in exchange for them signing a mutual agreement today and never bothering her again. The judge looked at Morales, the legal aid lawyer. Counsel, do you have anything to add? Any proof of income or contribution to the family finances from your client? Morales looked at his papers, then at Alex, who shook his head and sighed. They had gone to war with water pistols. No, Your Honor. Then I suggest your client accept the agreement proposed by the defendant. If we go to trial with this documentary evidence, your client could not only lose, but also be ordered to pay legal fees. An absolute and humiliating defeat. Alex, destroyed and with no strength left to fight, signed the agreement. He wouldn't get half of anything. He would only get back his personal belongings still in the suitcases, and a check for an amount so laughable it would barely cover a few months' rent in a shared apartment. When the judge's gavel sounded and the divorce was official, Caroline didn't jump for joy. She just sighed deeply. Stepping out onto the street, leaving Alex and Rose slumped on a bench in the hallway, she felt the New York air on her face. Beatrice shook her hand. Congratulations, Caroline. It's over. You're free. Thank you for everything, Beatrice, Caroline smiled, walking toward her car. She didn't look back. The past was buried. A year passed. Time flowed, carrying away the bitter sediment and leaving clear water. For Caroline, it was a year of absolute rebirth. One Saturday morning, she woke up without an alarm, caressed by the sun in her immense bed. The house breathed at her rhythm. There were no longer echoes of complaints, only the sound of jazz music in the background. The living room displayed her paintings, the shelves overflowed with books, and the balcony was a small oasis of lush plants. After making coffee, she sat on the terrace with her laptop. She was planning her next big step, a 3-week solo trip through Japan for the upcoming fall. Something that was once unthinkable. That's a waste of money. Besides, a woman shouldn't travel alone, Alex would have said, purely out of panic at having to make his own meals. Now the world was hers. Professionally, she was flying high. She had been promoted to senior director of her department. She earned more, had more responsibility, and felt empowered. She was no longer the workhorse for a parasite. She was the master of her own destiny. She made time for her friends, Lucy, Laura, and Marta. A few colleagues had asked her out, but she was in no hurry. She wasn't traumatized, just discerning. If she ever shared her life again, it would be with an equal partner, not someone to rescue or support. That same afternoon, while driving her car through Manhattan after a shopping trip, she stopped at a red light on a major avenue. She glanced distractedly out the window at the sidewalk. There, at a crowded city bus stop, she saw 2 figures she knew very well. It was Rose and Alex. Time seemed to stand still. Rose looked like she had aged 10 years. She wore cheap, worn-out clothes, and her face was etched with perpetual bitterness. She was grumbling, pointing a finger at a crowded, approaching bus. Beside her stood Alex, his shoulders slumped. He no longer wore tailored shirts. He wore the ugly blue polo shirt of a discount supermarket uniform. He looked gaunt with a receding hairline and the dead eyes of someone crushed by routine. When the bus stopped, the two had to push and be elbowed by the crowd to get on. Caroline saw Alex nearly fall as he tripped on the bus step. Seeing that scene, Caroline felt no malice, no triumph, no revenge. She just felt nothing. They were like minor characters from a show she had stopped watching a long time ago. A tiny flicker of pity crossed her mind, but vanished instantly. Their current situation was the fruit they themselves had sown with their arrogance and laziness. The light turned green. The car behind her gave a short honk. Caroline smiled, pressed the accelerator, and left that bus stop and those ghosts behind, losing them forever in her rearview mirror. That night, leaning on the railing of her terrace, looking at the lights of the city skyline, against the darkness she thought of mile marker 82, on I-95, the craziest, most terrifying thing she had ever done. At that moment, she thought she was destroying her marriage. How wrong she was. She wasn't destroying anything. She was building her own life. By saying the word out, she began the most important journey of all, the journey to find herself again. She smiled in the darkness, a smile of peace and victory. She was no longer a refuge for anyone looking to leech off her efforts. She had become an impregnable fortress, and inside that fortress, at last, she was immeasurably happy.